Hi folks, I'm Steve Butler. Today, we're bringing the soccer field indoors. We're creating a foosball game. Come see how we do it here in the garage. All right, let's have a look at our project. The hardest thing about this is waiting for the glue and the paint to dry so you can get playing. We have a simple box construction using 3/4 inch plywood. We have our sides and we have our end pieces. The joinery to this, this is a great intro project for anybody getting acquainted with woodwork, and we're using simple rabbet joints, and then we're going to put a bead of glue in there and some staples, attach them to our side pieces. We drill 3/4 inch holes for our playing rods to come through. We're using 3/4 inch dowels as our playing rods, and then we cut out a spot for our goal, our nets. And you could use old fishing net if you have one around. You can cut up any kind of webbing you want, and I just use some upholstery tacks for that to clean it up, give it a nicer look. Now, our paddles, or our men for this, are 1/4 inch pieces of plywood, and I made a jig for the router, and I put our dowel pieces in there, and I cut a 1/4 inch notch for these pieces to fit or nestle in, and it just gives it a little more stability. On the ends, I went ahead and bought some old bicycle handle grips and just attached those on there. And we also have some O-rings, which you can find in the plumbing section at your local home center, and they act as stops. Help it so that when they bang up against the plywood sides, it doesn't ruin your paddles. On the underside, I attached these little rubber bumpers. You can buy them at any woodworking catalog store, your home center. And this fits nicely on a dining room table. You can take it outside, play it on your picnic table. It's a great project indoors or outdoors. Ping pong ball, anything you want. All right, let's go get started. All right, a few plywood pieces out of the scrap bin, some dowel rod, and we have all the material needed to create a project that's guaranteed to give you and your family hours of fun. First thing we're going to do is cut those boards to size. Let's get started. The foosball table project is a great project to start woodworking. It's a great learning tool. Essentially, the joinery is exactly the same as in cabinet making. Well, not exactly the same, but incorporates some of the same joinery. We're using a rabbet joint, which you'll find on a lot of kitchen cabinets. If you turn the table up, right, you have a cabinet. You attach a door to it, you have a cabinet. So, I mean, woodworking's all about boxes in my eyes, so you just bigger boxes. So this is a great project to start woodworking. That, and it's fun. You know, learning should be fun. All right, first thing we're going to do is rip our boards to width. I've set the fence at 6 inches, and we're just going to cut our side pieces and our end pieces. I have my glasses on, wear safety glasses, hearing protection if you like. We've got the dust collection going. All right, that's it. Side pieces are cut, our end pieces are cut to width. We're just going to go ahead and use our cross-cut sled and cut them to length. As an educator, the best way to hook anybody into something new is to make it fun for them. I mean, if you're that kid learning piano and you're practicing the scales over and over, I mean, how boring is that? But you make it relevant and you attach a song that you're into to it, all of a sudden you're learning, you're retaining the information. So it's just a great learning tool. And selfish reasons, it was a lot of fun to make and a lot of fun to play. My son and I will play with it now, so we have that time together. And it's just awesome to see something you made use. That's it, you know. I couldn't imagine doing anything else if I wasn't making things, so the fact that they get used is just, it complements it, it's great. All right, I've set up my cross-cut sled. I'm gonna take my side pieces and we're gonna cut those at 40 1/4 inches. I'm just gonna take my square, draw a line. And I'm just lining up my line where the kerf of the blade comes through on my crosscut sled. All right. Going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. All right, the end pieces are cut at 23 3/4 inch. So same thing. I'm just going to use my square. If you're cutting multiple pieces, you might want to attach a stop to your cross-cut sled or whatever. This one, it's only a couple of pieces each. All right, that's it. We have our pieces cut. That's pretty much all there is to the body of this project. Now what I'm going to do on our side pieces, the longer pieces, I'm going to cut a rabbet. And it's just going to be half the width of this board. In this case, we're using 3/4 inch plywood. So we're going to cut a 3/8 inch deep rabbet. And it's going to be 3/4 wide, the width of the plywood piece. And our end pieces are going to fit into that rabbet. And we're just going to throw some staples in there and some glue, and that's just going to give it a little more stability. All right. Before I go ahead and change out my blades to my stacked dado set, I'm just going to leave this as it is, and I cut the paddle pieces. They're made out of 1/4 inch plywood. So I'm just going to set my fence at 1 inch. They're 1 inch by 3 inches long. So we'll just do those and then come along and cross cut them to 3 inches. We need 18 of them. All right, just going to go ahead and cross cut those to 3 inches, and then we'll put in our stacked dado blades. The meaning of foosball, I have no idea. I think it's a product. I did a little research, and the only definition I could come up with was tabletop soccer. So I don't know if it's some derivative of football, foosball, football, but that was it. I've set up my stacked dado blades, and essentially what they are is two blades. Think of it as a sandwich or a cookie. There's two blades on the outside and cutters in the middle that just kind of nestle in between like your fingers do. And you can make it a 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, you know, incrementally move up. I have 3/4 of an inch in there, the width of the plywood pieces we're using. You can see that there. What I'm going to do, butt my fence right up on it. I have a sacrificial wood fence here, so if I happen to go a little too close, it doesn't cut into the metal fence, cuts into the wooden one. And our rabbet is right up on the edge there. We're going to make it cut so that our end pieces fit nice and flush to our side pieces. If you're a little off, all it's going to do is change the dimension of your game by a hair. It really doesn't matter. Now this is all the joinery to this. These simple rabbet joints, glue and some staples. Can't get easier. Works really, really well. All right, I've drawn a line. We want to raise our blades 3/8 of an inch, the depth of our rabbet. Always make a test cut first. There we go, make sure your blades lock. I like to get a little shove on it now and then. Just using my simple miter gauge. All right. There we go. Nice and flush there. That works well. You can see how that's going to fit in. We're going to throw a bead of glue in there, some staples from the other side. That'll hold in that plywood nice. All right, our test pieces are done. I'm just going to grab our sides and cut our rabbets. Now before you do, have a quick glance and see if there's a better face side that you might want on the inside of your game or the outside. There we go. You don't want to go too fast, you'll get a lot more tear out. If you go too slow, you can burn the wood. It's just a nice fluid motion. So that's it. The rabbets are cut on our side pieces. We have our ends. They're just going to butt right in there. That's it. That's the meat and potatoes of the project. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and measure and lay out the holes that we're going to cut with Forstner bit for our rods, our game rods. And then we're going to go ahead and cut out the spots for the nets, for the goal. I think this is a great beginner project, or intermediate actually. It's fine. Like I said, learning what anytime you learn something new, there's a language to it. And you know, learning woodworking can be very daunting at first. What's a dado? What's a rabbet? I mean, you have to learn the language. You have to learn how to use the tools, the equipment safely, and just the materials. What do I use? All right, we have all our pieces cut to size. The next thing we have to do are cut out our spaces for our goal. What I did, just simply drew a line in the center of the board, and I measured 2.5 inches up. And you know, it's kind of arbitrary. You can make it as wide as you want, but I chose 4 inches. So carry your lines over though. It's important that you draw the same pattern on the other side, and I'll show you why. We're going to go ahead and cut this out on the bandsaw. I went straight to my line. I'm just going to back out slowly, and this is why it was important to carry it over on the other side. I don't have the room over here, so I'm just going to flip this, do the same thing on this side. You just want to go nice and easy, nice smooth cut, nothing too fast. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is simply cut corner to corner and nibble out the waste as we go along. All right, we have that cut out. We're just going to take a file or sandpaper, make this smooth. Just going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other end board. All right, we have our end pieces cut. Now what we need to do is drill 6 holes in the side, in each side, for the dowel rods, for the playing rods. What I've done is I've measured up 3¼ inches, and I started 4 inches from each end, and basically these are 6¼ inches apart. All right, We're going to drill a 7/8" hole using our Forstner bit. All right, that looks great. We're just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. All right, we have our inboards cut, the goal cut out. We have our dowel rod holes cut in our sides. We're just going to go ahead, throw some glue in our rabbet joints, and I'm going to use some staples. All right. You don't need a ton of glue, don't forget. It's only going to squeeze out and you had some excess to clean up there. Just want to make sure the top's flush. All right, let's just turn this around. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, now what I'm going to do is going to turn this over and attach the bottom. I went ahead and cut the bottom. It's simply a 2-foot by 4-foot panel. I bought it at the home center. In the old days, they used to call these handy panels. And this one I've left at 2 feet, and I've just trimmed off a couple inches underneath. And I'm just going to throw on a bead of glue. Just go around the perimeter, square it up, throw in some staples. You don't need much, just a fine bead. Again, the more squeeze out or excess you have, the more cleaning up you have to do. All right. So we're just going to start at one corner and go around and square this up. And I'm just going to split it. And we have a 3/4 inch board, so I'm just going to try and get it right down the middle. All right, that looks good. Just going to go ahead, round over the corners. We can use a router, we can sand them, take a file. You know, before you attach this is when you have to think about painting. This one I'm leaving plain, but if you wanted to, this is when it would have been easier to paint the bottom before you attach it. I incorporate a lot of off-the-shelf lumber or plywood in my projects because I want it to be accessible to people economically and readily. I mean, you can go to any big box home center and buy the materials. You might pay a little more, but in the end it'll save you. If you go to a specialty lumber place for furniture making and you buy furniture grade lumber, it doesn't come dimensioned and looking all nice. You have to put it through the planer and do that. And if you don't have any experience in picking out lumber, it can be very daunting. You don't know what lies underneath. It doesn't have the bark on it, but it's what's called in the rough. And it's, you don't know what lies underneath it. You could waste a lot of money if you haven't learned what to look for. You run it through a planer and there could be checks and cracks underneath and you've just wasted your money. All right, I have these little rubber bumpers I'm just going to attach to the bottom. That way it doesn't slide around when we're playing the game. While we're waiting for the glue to dry on our box, we might as well go ahead and work on the dowel rods. These are going to hold our game paddles. What we're doing, here's a sample piece I made. We're going to notch this out, and that's going to hold our paddle, and it's going to fit in nicely there. And how I'm going to do that is with the router, and I made a jig to do that. Let me just put this back together and I'll show you how this works. Check this out. This is a simple little jig I made just using some offcuts. I have a couple of pieces of pine attached that I cut a rabbet in, and that allows the router to slide in a track essentially without side-to-side movement. I have a piece of plywood that I cut a dado in there, and what that does allows me to slide the dowel right in there. Now, this, a little scrap of hardwood, I cut a V-notch in it, and that simply fits over. We screw it in, and it acts as a clamp. So the last thing I want is this to roll on me, especially when I'm using the router. So I'm simply going to line up my center lines and then use my square and draw a line, extend these lines down. Now, an important thing here is you want to make sure all of these are on the same level. You don't have one notch going one way, one going the other, or your paddles aren't going to line up. So what I do, and this is actually going to be important for later on, is I'm just going to drill a small hole there. It's easy to split these dowels. And we're just going to put a little screw in here. Now that acts as a sight. So it's straight up. So when I make my next pass, all I have to do is make sure that's in the same position, and they're all going to be consistent. Start your router away from your workpiece. There we go. We have our notches cut. Simply put that in, and I'm going to use this opportunity to pre-drill. Sit that paddle in there. Just pre-drill for our screw hole to hold the paddle on. Let off the pressure of our clamp. I'm going to move this down to our next center line and repeat the process. We have 3 paddles on each rod, and we have 6 rods. So I want people to have fun, so they retain the information, and I want them to be able to learn easily. Not everybody has the money to buy all the tools. That's what the show's about. Just get out there and try and make things. I don't want anyone to ever not do something because they can't afford it. All right, let me show you what I did here. I've attached our paddles, our game pieces. These are our 1-inch by 3-inch men that we cut out of 1/4-inch plywood. Sat those in the notch. We pre-drilled our holes. We screwed those on. And what I did is these O-rings. You can buy them in the plumbing section at your home center. You put one on beside each player, and they act as a bumper, a buffer in a sense. Now, that screw I used in the beginning when we were doing the router jig as our sight comes in handy now. Attach a screw in there, and it acts as a stop. Now, this is awesome. Let me show you what I did. You can use old a pipe insulator or just some different colored tape or spray paint to distinguish your players. I ordered old bicycle grips. I have some green ones and some red ones. And you want to attach them at the end that's 13 inches long. That's why we left this one longer. There we go. So I'm just going to go ahead on the rest of the dowels, attach our paddles, our men, our handles, and put our O-rings on. All right, that looks great. I've attached all the paddles into our notches. We have our rubber washers, which are going to act as a bumper. We've attached our handles, our vintage handles, which you don't have to do that. I just think it really adds a nice touch. If you wanted to, you could paint the box. Now, all that's left to do is attach the nets. And let me show you what I did. I bought really cheap a small fishing net. And you can use whatever you want. And then I attached it with some upholstery tacks. Attached it to the bottom so it just catches the ball. Gonna go ahead, do that to the other side, and we're good to go. All right, that looks great. I had a lot of fun building this project. Well, I'm being challenged to a game. I hope you come back and see what we're building next here in the garage.
Just found your number, thought I'd drop you a line. You know I've been out on this road such a long, long time. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing just fine. But hey, I'm doing fine out here on the road. As long as I have friends to call, I'm never alone. Folks wonder how I take all that driving all the time.
Okay, ready? I don't know.
You ready? Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah. Ready?
I'm not ready.
You